Hi, I'm Dr. Josh Matthews, and on today's episode of my series, What Makes This Movie Great, we're going to talk about one of the classic westerns from Hollywood, and probably one of the most influential movies ever. It's the 1939 western Stagecoach, coming up next. Stagecoach is a 1939 western directed by the very famous American Hollywood director John Ford. This movie stars Claire Trevor, and as second billing you have John Wayne. This is basically John Wayne's first major role. Hereafter he would always have top billing. The movie is essentially about a group of travelers in the late 1800s in the American West who need to go from one town to another. They're all from different walks of life, and they all have different reasons for traveling. They each board a large stagecoach, and along the way learn to talk and get along and mingle. Now they know that the Apache Indians are on the warpath, and so there's great risk to the stagecoach that it will be attacked. Along the way, they stop and pick up an outlaw, the John Wayne character. They stop at a Mexican hacienda, and then of course they encounter danger later on. That's basically the plot of the movie, but this is an ensemble cast, and each character has his or her own story. Basically, Stagecoach is what we call a grand hotel movie, named after a 1930s French movie in which you have an ensemble cast assembling in one space for an entire movie, a hotel in the case of Grand Hotel, and they're from different walks of life and they have to sort out their problems by talking. Here in Stagecoach, you have the same thing. All the characters get together in a stagecoach and sort out who they are, who's the most important, and they blend their individual stories together into basically a large group story. This movie is very political. Every single character is a character type, and you're supposed to follow that character type's arc from beginning of the movie to the end of the movie in order to pick up on the messages that the movie is saying about each character. At the beginning of the movie, riding the stagecoach, you have the upper class, high and mighty citizens. One is a distinguished lady who's a sort of a Southern Belle, kind of a Southern Belle character. And then you have a banker, and you know he's actually fleeing the town, stealing money, but he talks as if he is the highest class person in the stagecoach. You have a Southern gentleman character who is once about honor and dignity, but on the other hand is a gambler. Lower down you have a doctor who's an alcoholic, and he's being kicked out of the town by the town moral police. Also a prostitute is being kicked out of the town as well. Driving the stagecoach is the sheriff who's in charge, and the stagecoach driver who is total comic relief, and you know he's a low-class character because he's married to a Mexican woman. Then you have the John Wayne character who's an outlaw. He shouldn't be, he's been wrong, but nevertheless he's been in jail. Other classes of characters show up, Mexicans and Apaches, and the high and mighty moral police of the initial town that the stagecoach launches from. The messages in this movie I think are pretty simple, but it's interesting how much is mixed together and how it all sort of sorts out in the end. One of the ideas in this movie is that the lowly are going to ascend, to become higher and better, and they're more noble and pure than the high and mighty sorts of people, like for example the banker in particular and the Southern gentleman as well. So the high in this movie go down low, and the low are ascend to the highest heights of the status hierarchy. This is a western. You're going to have Indians, stagecoach chases, shootouts, characters fall in love over the course of a one-day stagecoach journey, and just about every classic western trope. It's been said that Stagecoach was watched 30, 40, 50 times by Orson Welles, who at the time was not a movie director, but would soon make a movie based on what he saw in Stagecoach, that movie being Citizen Kane. And probably all other grand hotel movies pay their respects to Stagecoach. By that I mean movies where characters gather in a single space, whether it's a building, a ship, an airplane, a spaceship, whether they're traveling in a vessel of some sort or whether in a stationary place. You have characters from all walks of life coming together, telling their stories, and the movie sort of sorts out who they are in the status hierarchy for you. All of these bear resemblance to 1939 Stagecoach. The filming in this is by John Ford, and it's absolutely exquisite. Probably perfect editing, and that's why Orson Welles watched it and studied it so much. There's a lot of interesting ideas in this movie as well. One is the US government the greatest authority, or is it the sheriff who represents the local area or county? This movie sort of pits the US federal government versus the local sheriff. Another is, what's an outlaw? There are good outlaws, the John Wayne character, for example, and there are bad outlaws. America loves its rebelliousness, so you have to have I think, a good outlaw character. Someone who's noble, but also a little rascally. And he faces off against the bad guys, the bad outlaws. So it turns out there are lots of conflicts in this movie. And maybe the main one is the Westerners, the Americans, period, versus the Indians. The Indians are stereotyped pretty badly in this movie, and John Ford actually sort of repented of his depiction of the Apache Indians. The Apaches are pretty stereotyped. They don't even speak in this movie, and all they do is kill, kill, kill. But there is another group who is equally hated, and these are what I've called the moral police. This was a real historical group, moralistic, upright women in a Western community who, in order to reform communities, tried to kick out the alcoholics and the prostitutes, which actually happens in this movie. And you see the prostitute in this movie, one of the lowliest people on the Stagecoach, become exalted in the end. This is a movie that hits my mind more than my heart, I do admit that. But doing an analysis on this movie is always interesting. And I can't argue with the fact that so many people and so many movies have been influenced by Stagecoach. So that's why I think this movie is great. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear from you what you think of this video or what you think of the movie. So please comment. Thank you very much. Have a great day.